Now let us look at this slide, which presents an important idea in the Vicar of Wakefield: the difference between what people appear to be and who they really are. The title of the slide is The Dramatis Personae, Public Facades versus True Identities. The phrase, dramatis personae, simply means the list of characters in a literary or dramatic work. But this slide is doing more than simply listing the characters. It is showing us a very important technique used in the novel. Characters are often not exactly what they appear to be. In other words, there is a difference between the public identity and the true identity. This connects directly with two important ideas mentioned at the top of the slide: identity and deception. The basic question we should keep in mind throughout this slide is, can we trust appearances? Goldsmith repeatedly shows us that the answer is not always yes. A person may look poor but actually be powerful. A person may look respectable but actually be morally corrupt. A person may look harmless but secretly be manipulating other people. So, let us examine each character carefully. First, we have Dr. Charles Primrose. On the left, his perceived identity is that of a virtuous, prudent, and comfortable vicar. A vicar is a parish clergyman. At the beginning of the novel, Dr. Primrose appears to have a stable and respectable life. He has a family, a position in society, and strong religious beliefs. But the right side gives us a deeper understanding of his role. He is described as a Job-like patriarch tested by absolute ruin. The reference to Job is important. In the Bible, Job is a righteous man who suffers tremendous losses and is tested through extreme hardship. Similarly, Dr. Primrose begins with security and then experiences a series of disasters. He loses his financial security. His family suffers. His home is destroyed. He experiences humiliation and imprisonment. So Dr. Primrose's real importance is not simply that he is a respectable clergyman. He is a father whose moral character is tested by suffering. And this is one of the central ideas of the novel. It is easy to be good when life is comfortable. The real test is whether a person can remain compassionate, faithful, and morally strong when everything goes wrong. Dr. Primrose therefore becomes the moral center of the novel. Now we come to Mr. Burchell. This is probably the most important example of mistaken identity on this slide. What does Mr. Burchell appear to be? He appears to be a poor, wandering, somewhat eccentric scholar. He does not initially present himself as a powerful or wealthy aristocrat. Because of his appearance and behavior, other characters may underestimate him. But his true identity is completely different. He is actually Sir William Thornhill, a powerful and just aristocrat. This creates dramatic irony. The audience eventually understands something that other characters do not fully understand at first. That means we learn to question appearances. Mr. Burchell's apparently humble identity hides considerable social power. And there is an important moral contrast here. The person who appears poor and insignificant turns out to possess goodness, justice, and authority. This contrasts strongly with characters who possess wealth and social status but use that power badly. So Mr. Burchell represents the idea that true worth is not always visible from outward appearance. Now let us move to Squire Thornhill. At first, he appears to be charming, wealthy, friendly, and socially attractive. He has money, he has status, he knows how to behave attractively in society. To an inexperienced person, he can look like an ideal gentleman. But the right side reveals his true narrative role. He is a ruthless and deceitful predator. This is a major example of appearance versus reality. Squire Thornhill uses his social position and attractive personality to deceive people. His behavior toward Olivia is especially important. Olivia is attracted to the image he creates of himself, but that image does not represent his true character. Through Thornhill, Goldsmith warns us that wealth, charm, and social position are not proof of moral goodness. This is one of the most important exam points from the slide. Never judge moral character only by appearance, wealth, or social status. Now we come to the town ladies. On the left, they appear to be high society women and fashionable tastemakers. In other words, they seem to belong to respectable fashionable society. But the right side reveals that they are actually disguised sex workers enlisted by Squire Thornhill. This is another example of deception through appearance. Their social appearance is carefully constructed. They look like respectable, fashionable women, but their actual role in Thornhill's schemes is very different. This episode also contributes to Goldsmith's criticism of fashionable society. The novel repeatedly asks us to look beyond surfaces. Clothing, manners, wealth, and social reputation can all be used to create a false impression. So the town ladies are not important merely because of who they are individually. They are important because they help Goldsmith expose the artificial nature of appearances. Finally, we come to Ephraim Jenkinson. He appears to be a distinguished and scholarly old man. Again, this is a respectable public identity. But underneath that appearance is a very different character. He is a career swindler who eventually becomes an agent of justice. This is particularly interesting because Jenkinson's character demonstrates that people can change. At first, he is associated with deception and criminal activity. But later, he becomes involved in helping expose wrongdoing. So his character complicates the simple division between good people and bad people. A person who has behaved badly in the past may still change. This gives us an important moral lesson. Human beings are capable of transformation. Now let us step back and understand the entire slide. There are really two worlds presented here. The first is the world of appearance. People look respectable, wealthy, poor, scholarly, fashionable, or harmless. The second is the world of reality. When we look more deeply, we discover hidden identities, hidden motives, deception, and sometimes unexpected goodness. Mr. Burchell looks like a poor wanderer but is actually Sir William Thornhill. Squire Thornhill looks like a charming gentleman but is actually deeply deceptive. The town ladies look like fashionable society women but are secretly part of Thornhill's schemes. Jenkinson looks like a respectable old scholar but has a history as a swindler. And Dr. Primrose appears to be a comfortable and respectable vicar, but his deeper role is that of a suffering father whose morality is tested through extreme hardship. Therefore, the central lesson of this slide is very simple. Appearance is not always reality. Goldsmith teaches us to look beyond social labels, clothing, wealth, reputation, and first impressions. For competitive examinations, remember the key pairings: Dr. Primrose, the suffering moral patriarch; Mr. Burchell, hidden identity, actually Sir William Thornhill; Squire Thornhill, charming appearance but deceptive and predatory character; town ladies, fashionable appearance hiding their actual role; Ephraim Jenkinson, apparent respectability, criminal past, and later moral transformation. So, if you remember only one sentence from this entire slide, remember this. In The Vicar of Wakefield, Goldsmith repeatedly contrasts public appearance with hidden reality to show that true character is revealed not by social status or outward appearance, but by actions, morality, and how a person behaves when tested. Now let us come to this slide, which explains the overall narrative movement of The Vicar of Wakefield. The title is The Narrative Arc, Tracing the Wheel of Fortune. The easiest way to understand this graph is to imagine the story as a wheel that keeps turning. At the beginning, the Primrose family is comfortable and prosperous. Then their fortune suddenly falls. After that, they experience deception, disappointment, and catastrophe. Eventually, Dr. Primrose reaches the lowest point of his suffering. And finally, the story turns upward again, bringing recognition, restoration, and justice. So the basic movement is prosperity, decline, suffering, and finally restoration. Before we go through the 5 stages, one important clarification is necessary. The novel itself is not formally divided into 5 dramatic acts like a 5-act play. This slide uses Act 1 to Act 5 as a convenient way of organizing the major stages of the narrative. So, for an examination, do not say that Goldsmith officially divided The Vicar of Wakefield into 5 acts. Instead, say that the novel can be understood through a 5-stage narrative arc. Now let us start with Act 1, the disruption. The slide describes this stage as the movement from prosperity to sudden destitution. At the beginning, Dr. Charles Primrose and his family appear to live a secure and happy life. Dr. Primrose is a respected clergyman. He has a wife, several children, a home, and financial security. He is also generous and charitable. However, this security does not last. A financial disaster destroys the family's comfortable position. The bankruptcy of a merchant causes Dr. Primrose to lose his money. This is the first major turning point in the story. The important idea here is the instability of fortune. A person may feel completely secure today and lose everything tomorrow. This is why the image of the wheel is so appropriate. Fortune can rise, but it can also fall. The family therefore moves away from its original comfortable life and begins a much more difficult phase. Now we move to Act 2, the deceptions. The slide describes this as the movement from false hopes to escalating folly. This stage is important because the family's problems are no longer only financial. They become connected with deception, appearance, ambition, and mistaken judgment. The family encounters people who do not necessarily appear to be what they really are. The most important example is Squire Thornhill. He appears charming, wealthy, and respectable. But beneath that attractive appearance is a deeply deceptive character. Olivia becomes particularly vulnerable to his appearance and promises. At the same time, other characters also make mistakes because they judge people too quickly. This is where the theme of appearance versus reality becomes very important. Goldsmith is showing us that human beings can be deceived when they trust appearances without understanding a person's true character. The word folly on the slide is also important. Folly simply means foolish behavior or poor judgment. Several characters make decisions based on pride, ambition, emotion, or incomplete information. And these decisions gradually make the family's situation worse. Now we reach Act 3, the catastrophe. The slide describes this stage as moving from the elopement toward the fire. This is where the family's troubles become much more serious. Olivia's situation becomes disastrous, and the family's emotional and financial problems intensify. Then comes one of the major physical catastrophes of the novel. The family home is destroyed by fire. The fire is important not only as an event in the plot but also symbolically. The family loses its physical home at almost the same time that it is losing its sense of security. So the fire represents destruction. The family has already lost wealth. Now it loses its home as well. At this point, the narrative is moving further and further downward on the graph. The characters have gone from comfort to poverty, from hope to disappointment, and from security to serious danger. And this brings us to Act 4, the dungeon. This is the lowest point on the graph. The word nadir is used here. Nadir simply means the lowest point. So this is the lowest point in Dr. Primrose's journey. After the destruction of the family's home and the accumulation of his debts, Dr. Primrose is imprisoned in the local county jail because he cannot meet his financial obligations. This is extremely important. The imprisonment is not simply another unfortunate event. It becomes a test of his character. He has lost wealth. He has lost social comfort. He has suffered family troubles. Now he loses his physical freedom as well. But something interesting happens. Although Dr. Primrose is physically imprisoned, he does not completely lose his moral strength. Instead, he begins to show greater patience, sympathy, and spiritual strength. He interacts with other prisoners and tries to improve their lives. So the jail becomes more than a place of punishment. It becomes a place of moral reflection and transformation. This connects strongly with the biblical story of Job. Job suffers enormous losses despite being a righteous man. Similarly, Dr. Primrose experiences extreme suffering and is tested by circumstances beyond his control. But the important point is that suffering does not completely destroy his moral identity. Instead, it strengthens his understanding of patience, forgiveness, and human weakness. Now, finally, we reach Act 5, the reversal. This is where the graph suddenly turns upward. The subtitle says, Miraculous Restitutions to Ultimate Justice. The word, restitution, means restoration. Something that has been lost is returned. At this stage, hidden truths are revealed. Misunderstandings begin to disappear. Good characters receive recognition. The villains are exposed. The family is eventually reunited. And Dr. Primrose's suffering finally leads toward restoration. This is also where the idea of divine providence becomes important. Providence means the belief that God guides or oversees events, even when human beings cannot understand the purpose of their suffering at the time. For much of the novel, the Primrose family may feel that their lives are simply collapsing. But by the end, events are rearranged in a way that produces recognition, justice, and restoration. So the final upward movement of the graph represents more than simply, everyone becomes happy. It represents the restoration of moral order. Now let us look at the entire graph one more time. At the beginning, the line is high. That represents prosperity and security. Then it falls. That represents financial loss and disruption. It rises and falls again as the family experiences temporary hopes and new disappointments. Then it reaches its lowest point at the jail. That is the moment of maximum suffering. And finally, the line rises sharply. That represents recognition, justice, family reunion, and restoration. So the entire narrative can be remembered in 5 simple words: disruption, deception, catastrophe, suffering, reversal, or even more simply, rise, fall, deeper fall, lowest point, and rise again. The deeper message is that Goldsmith is not presenting suffering as completely meaningless. The family's suffering becomes a test of character. It exposes deception. It teaches humility. It reveals true relationships. And ultimately, it leads toward moral and emotional restoration. Therefore, the Wheel of Fortune is one of the best ways to visualize the novel. Fortune changes, social position changes, wealth changes, but the novel ultimately suggests that the most valuable things are not wealth or status. They are family loyalty, virtue, forgiveness, faith, and moral resilience. So, for competitive examinations, remember this final sequence. Act 1, disruption, prosperity to poverty. Act 2, deceptions, false appearances and mistaken hopes. Act 3, catastrophe, major family disasters, including the fire. Act 4, dungeon, imprisonment, suffering, and moral testing. Act 5, reversal, revelation, justice, reunion, and restoration. And one final point is especially important. This 5-part division is an analytical way of understanding the narrative arc, not Goldsmith's original formal division of the novel into 5 acts.